Well, you are joining myself and Elite Investor Club Chairman Graham Rowan for the final instalment of our week of content, which we have been calling Surviving in the New Economy. And it was Graham who came up with the concept for this week. And I do hope you've been enjoying it. We've covered a lot of ground. And our final instalment is called How to Survive and Thrive in the Coming Carnage. And Graham, I'm slightly worried about the use of the word of carnage there. Should I be?
Well, I think we touched on it briefly last time, but I think that the problem is that so much of this just goes straight over people's heads. You know, I'm sure that the average person in the street has got no idea what the Federal Reserve is up to, buying shares and ETFs, you know, all the money printing that's going on and how that's going to eventually, rattle through the system. So I think for many people, you know, this could be a really challenging decade. But as ever, the people who are the best informed and make the best decisions are going to find themselves coming out of it in the best position. So I think to try and get people's attention and to shake through and break through that inertia, I try to use sometimes some quite strong language because, you know, this is not a normal time. You know, it's a century since we had something on the scale of this pandemic, and all the other structural things that were already going on. You know, whether it's Brexit, whether it's AI, whether it's the aging population in this country, all these things are still happening, and they're kind of coming together in the 2020s in a way that I think not many people could have predicted. So I think this is a really important time to take stock, to revisit your plans and your portfolios and your ambitions, and to look at some of the challenges and risks that are coming down the pipe and say, how am I going to try to insulate myself from them? So essentially, I want to talk about this at three levels. One is the philosophy behind it. Then I want to talk about the strategy. Then I want to mention some of the specific tactics. And there's a diagram we can show later that will perhaps reinforce some of that. But there's no point in I'm just, a lot of people tend to go straight to the detail and the tactics. Well, you've got to put them in the context of a strategy, and a strategy tends to be driven by a philosophy. And the conclusion I've come to is that there are so many forces operating that are not necessarily in our interests, like the government's enormous powers that it's taken advantage of with lockdown and so on. That's not going to go away. That's only going to get worse. The manipulation and devaluation of currencies, the potential restrictions on our freedoms, whether that's freedom to move here or even to move abroad. You look at what China's doing in Hong Kong. These are all signals of a direction of travel. And so for me, the philosophy that I've come up with on the basis that, whether you're Boris Johnson or Dominic Cummings or Donald Trump, you seem to have to come up with a short catchphrase that actually encompasses it all. And with apologies to the poet John Donne that said, no man is an island, I actually think the strategy, the philosophy, I should say, is that you are an island. And you start thinking of yourself almost like an independent country. And you start thinking, what are the things I need to do and to have in order to function as this independent entity so that I'm not at the whim or mercy of one particular group or one particular government or one particular currency or one particular residency. And if you accept that philosophy of needing to be independent of being severely constrained by one of those things, it leads you into the strategy, which is to become a well-diversified global citizen. And then we're into tactics. The point being, if you look at what the billionaires do, for example, you don't have to be a billionaire to learn from what they do. And so one of the things they do is they have multiple homes in multiple countries. They have multiple residencies, oftentimes multiple citizenships. So, in the words of that old Stevie Wonder song, if you had my kind of cash, you'd have more than one place to go. Well, they do, and they have. And we can all aspire to that. You don't have to be a billionaire to have homes in more than one country. So the philosophy is We want to achieve insulation and independence from all of these forces that we see around us getting more and more powerful. But we also obviously want to have choice. And what is wealth or success, however you want to measure it, other than having choices? And if you have more than one place to go, you have choices. So essentially, that's the thinking and that's the strategy that sits above all the specific tactics that we want to talk about.
Very interesting. I think what I would take away from that as well is that part of that strategy would be to have an enhanced cash buffer, because I think obviously margins are a lot slimmer, the risks are amplified. It's a tricky one though for landlords, because our instinct is to want to put our cash into bricks and mortar, and there's actually not that many places to store cash where we're getting any return, or we feel safe, particularly with the issue with banks and so on. So that's a bit of a dilemma for landlords. How would you address that, Graham?
Well, I think I'd address that in two ways. I think firstly, one of the things this has shown is that you just need a cash buffer, an emergency cash buffer for your life. And one of the things I've consciously started doing since lockdown is taking more cash out of the bank than I need and starting to accumulate 3 months of living expenses just as cash. And to me, that's just as, I think there's probably going to be another lockdown at some point. So this would be a good time to get the toilet roll stocked up and the tins of food and whatever else that, even keep your petrol tank full in the car in case you need to escape somewhere in the country or whatever. So I think we've got to learn those basic lessons of lockdown. You never thought this could happen. I had a guy called Tim Price, a fund manager, speak at one of our events 2 years ago, saying you should have 3 months of cash, you should have 3 months of food, you should have this. And to be honest, I just thought of a silly bugger. What's he so paranoid about? And here we are 2 years later. So let's learn that lesson. Separate point you're making there about if you're in business, you obviously need cash flow and working capital. And this is one of the things I've always struggled with business owners when it comes to talking about investments is they can always get a higher return on investment if they just plow that money back into the business than they can if they put it into one of my investments. And I have to have this debate and say to them, look, that's not the point. Your business exists to generate profit that you should then take out of that business and put into something else that will be a longer term asset for you. Because 101 things can go wrong in the business, and you don't know how long it's going to be around for. Look how many businesses have been affected this time around. So treat the business as a cash generator, and then turn those, obviously live your lifestyle, your basic lifestyle from the profits of the business, and turn the rest into a whole range of different assets with a decent kind of global diversification. And an obvious one I would point to at the moment is precious metals like gold and silver. Because we get so little return on cash now, the supposed penalty for holding precious metals, that, they don't pay any interest, goes away. So what you do get is the security of knowing this has got a 5,000-year track record of holding its value. And of course, what you then can do is apply a bit of what I call healthy paranoia, which is to say, don't hold that gold in the banking system and don't hold it in the UK. So I own gold in Switzerland and Singapore as well as London, and I also own silver. And I'm not really speculating on the price, although obviously it's been doing quite nicely recently. It's a long-term hold. It's an insurance policy against financial collapse. It's a currency I can use anywhere in the world, and it's got some little benefits. I specifically buy Britannia coins, which are legal tender, so there's no capital gains tax on them. I also, by buying the silver, having it stored in Switzerland, I don't have to pay VAT on it. So, if you tweak your strategy a little bit like that, you can have the insurance side of it at a reasonable price, and you're not losing anything because the cash wouldn't have made anything for you in the first place.
Well, it's so interesting to hear that, Graham. I think we're so fortunate to have your input on this topic for the Property Tribes community, because the kind of level of detail you're going into here is really what you discuss within the Elite Investor Club. So we're almost like having a little window in onto what you do and the work that you do with your investor members in the club. And it's just fascinating to hear what you're saying. I think, you know, a lot of us got into property because we understood it. We felt comfortable with it. You know, diversifying into things like investing in gold, it's something I've thought about, but I've never actually done it because I don't really know how. And this again boils down to education. And I think it leads me nicely onto my next point, is that I think we're entering the era of you know, having professional advice. We've always, you know, advocated that at Property Tribes in terms of your mortgage broker, your tax advisor, your lettings agent, to work with regulated and qualified professionals. And I think that's going to be even more the case going forwards. But perhaps thinking about building an international team of these kind of experts as well.
Very much so. That's a core part of implementing the strategy, because, you know, we always say you don't know what you don't know. And of course, UK tax law is one of the most complex in the world and impossible for the layman to understand. But when you start adding an international dimension to that, you know, it becomes even more so. So, for example, you know, one of the things I've done is to set up a business and buy property and get residency in Montenegro, which is a nice kind of Adriatic country just opposite Italy. And with the way their system works, if you own a property there and you set up a business, you can both get residency and a work permit. And they only tax you on income that arises inside the country. So if you had a business in Britain, but you were living over there, you wouldn't need to pay tax on the British earnings when you're there. But it also gives you, critically, a second place to go. Now, I confess, I did all this last year when we thought there was a chance that Jeremy Corbyn would get into power, and this was part of my own, you know, wealth preservation strategy. I was feeling quite relieved in January and February, and then I start seeing what is, you know, the money being thrown around now. I think, maybe it's just as well I did that. So yes, expertise is really important. And what happened, they're not just the fact of what they know, but it's kind of who they know and how they can speed up the process for you. So it's quite, in many ways, Montenegro is quite an old-fashioned country. It came out of communism just over a decade ago. So some of their systems and procedures are a little bit antiquated and paper-based. But these guys, because I've got local people on the ground, they were able to steer me through all that, take me to all the various government departments in one day, and get all the paperwork sorted. And then I jumped the queue at the ministry where there were 200 people waiting. They took me straight there to get sorted out with my permit. So having those kind of people on your team becomes really helpful when you want to implement the strategy of having, you know, property abroad, business abroad, residency abroad. And what's fascinating now is it's almost becoming a little bit of international competition for such people. So now you'll find, it's been in the news recently, I think in Barbados, they're offering a 12-month visa for $2,000 just because they've been decimated with the tourist trade. So they're trying to get all these work from home Brits to go to Barbados for a year for $2,000, which sounds a pretty cool deal, but it doesn't actually lead to residency in that one. But what you'll find is among the Caribbean countries, you can get passports from as little as 100,000. In Turkey, you can do it for $250,000, and that's buying a property, so you actually have an asset. In Cyprus, the Chinese are buying up Cypriot passports now because they want access to EU healthcare, because they want better quality healthcare because they've all been impacted by COVID-19. So another of these unexpected side effects is a rush for Cypriot passports as a gateway into Europe by wealthy Chinese who don't really want to stay there.
No, Russians as well buying up property in Cyprus as well for the same reason. It's fascinating. Just out of interest, Graham, you know, what sort of price would you be looking at as a starter, say, one-bed apartment in Montenegro?
Oh, they can start below €100,000, and they can go all the way up to, you know, I mean, we a shameless plug here, but we do, sell these properties on our opulent homes site, and it starts around 100, but it goes all the way up to 5 million if you want a penthouse on the marina. So it's the full range. I mean, they call Tibat on the Adriatic coast there, they call it the Monaco of the Montenegro. But that's probably a slight exaggeration, but it's a lovely place. And yeah, it's a very flexible system at the moment. Whether it'll stay that way, they've just introduced a citizenship program. For that, you have to either pay $250,000 in the north of the country or 450,000 in the more popular south of the country, which is where all the coastal resorts are. But for around about €500,000, you can have a second passport, and that's very competitive. And they are actually bizarrely trying to get into the EU, whereas obviously we're getting out of it. So if you wanted a back door to get back into Europe, something like that, or Turkey would be worth looking at.
No, definitely. I can see that. I guess we're coming to the end now. And your kind of summary was no need to panic, write down a plan and start implementing it today. And we will put up the little diagram that Graham referred to earlier in the interview. So any closing thoughts, Graham, on this week of content? Just by the by, very interesting to read today that the first person who has abused the Sybil's loan has been prosecuted, and there is an HMRC task force set up to now start looking at abuse of this government money. I'm very pleased to hear that. It's a good thing to do that and recoup money if it has been, got hold of, fraudulently, not a genuine business adversely affected by coronavirus. So I think we'll see that coming through as well, which is of interest to the property sector. Any closing thoughts, really, as we just end our week?
Yeah, I mean, I think really what I've tried to do, and I hope I've done this week, is to try and just get people to think a little bit more broadly and widely about their strategy for this next decade, because so much is going to change. There will be lots of opportunity, but there'll also be a huge amount of risk. Generally, I would say my strategy is that businesses are the best way of creating wealth in the short term. They throw off the wealth, but you then need to convert that income, that profit, into long-term assets that will give you that kind of durability. Now, I love mentioning the Colonna family, who've been wealthy in Rome for 900 years. And, Italy's only been a country for 150 years. So that gives you some kind of context. And they say the secret is the rule of thirds, which is 1/3 in gold, 1/3 in fine art, 1/3 in land and property. So, obviously, a lot of the people on the Property Tribes platform will already be overweight on the property side of that, but you might want to start thinking about converting the money you're making in your business or your career into some of those other long-term assets, because what you're trying to create is multi-generational wealth. And what you want is a situation where it's protected and where governments can't confiscate it from you, which is why you need more than one place to go. And I think the final thing I would add on that, something that not many people are talking about, but I think our children, and by that I mean the children of people, I'm a baby boomer, anyone that's got children growing up, they're facing a very uncertain future. The economic fallout of COVID-19 is just adding to all the other factors we've described. So one of the best inheritances and one of the best futures you can give them is a well-established family business that you can hand over to them, plus a portfolio of assets you've accumulated with the profits from the business. And then you're securing their future, as well as building this island of independence with you at the epicenter. So your longer term view is not just how can I survive now, but how can I have a sustainable long-term multi-generational model that I can successfully hand on to my children and take away some of the uncertainty that they're facing for their future as well.
Well, that makes perfect sense to me. And there will be people watching this, Graham, that have really liked what you said. It's really resonated with them. And what can people do if they would like to come and join you and your tribe of the Elite Investor Club?
Yeah, well, the website is eliteinvestorclub.com. And if you go to eliteinvestorclub.com/apply, there's a form you can fill in there. And then we can just send you a welcome pack. And we're actually just, before we actually came on to record this today, we're just finalizing our next live event, which will be the first one since February. So it's probably going to be end of August, beginning of September, but it'd be so nice to actually get together again, because one of the things people tell us, and I'm sure it's the same for you, is that they just love to meet like-minded people. And we've already talked about how few people care about their financial future, but being able to get back together, even at a 1 or 2 meter distance in the same room, I'm so looking forward to that.
No, indeed. And I think you kind of run these discovery events, and I've been along to a couple of your events, and it was very inspiring to meet some of your club members who are operating at kind of a much higher level than I am, just with my basic buy-to-let property portfolio. And I think it's really healthy to spend time with people that are much further and higher up than you are, as it helps you kind of raise your game. And that's a big part of what goes on with the Elite Investor Club, isn't it? The whole networking, there's so much support there, there's everybody sharing their thoughts, and you're hearing from people with years of experience, very large diversified portfolios. It's almost like another world, actually, when you go into these kind of environments with those kind of people. You just can't help but be inspired and to want to raise your game.
No, thank you very much. I mean, certainly we obviously welcome new members. We've had some people that have joined us already from the platform, and they are just fitting in great. So yeah, absolutely, do come and join us if you think it's relevant.
Fantastic. Well, as ever, Graham, you've been such an asset to the property community with your thought leadership, your insights, your ideas. I can't thank you enough for putting together this themed week for us again. And it's just been a really good week. I've so enjoyed talking to you myself personally, and I've got loads of questions buzzing around in my head that I'd love to continue on. So we'll have to do it again soon, but for now, I can't thank you enough for putting this week together and joining me on these Zoom calls. And if anybody's got any questions for Graham, you can leave them on the thread, or indeed we will also put a link to the Elite Investor Club social media platforms, and you can contact Graham there or via his website. But for now, both Graham and myself are saying thank you for watching. This has been Surviving in the New Economy with Graham Rowan, and we're closing out now, and we hope you've enjoyed the week. We'll be back soon.
Thanks, Vanessa. Thanks for watching, folks.
Thank you.